Soul Garden.
Hello, my fellow Soul Gardeners, and welcome now to Astro 103, episode 12, the final episode in our 103 series. We've been talking about planets in transit for the last 11 episodes, and today we're going to put it all together. In fact, today is putting it all together. This is where the astrology gets really exciting in my book. If you haven't fallen asleep by now, this will be where you wake up, okay? Now, putting it together. In other words, looking at the chart, what the hell's going on with me, Christopher? That's what everyone always asks. What's going on? So I thought I would share with you kind of like my approach to what's going on with a client, how I would look at it. For starters, the first thing I always look at is the solar chart, okay? Solar chart meaning that you run a chart for today's planets right today, and you turn the rising sign to your sign, okay? So you turn, if you are an Aries, then you just put Aries on the ascendant. If you are a Taurus, you put Taurus on the ascendant, and so on. You want to look at those planets, and today, to keep it simple, let's just say, let's figure out where the sun is, all right? So if you are a Taurus, let's see, let me come up with a new example. I know I use me a lot as an example. That's my Leo rising at work there. So let's say you're a Virgo, all right, and we're in Pisces. So if you're a Virgo and we're in Pisces, the sun is in the 7th house. That means as a Virgo, this month, you're working on relationship issues. And we'll just keep it at the sun right now. We won't get too complicated. Which means all month long, despite your natal chart, you are working on relationships. You're upgrading your belief structure around how your relationship should be, how you should relate to others. And relationships is the dominant lesson of the month, period. I don't care where the sun is in your natal chart, the dominant lesson is the solar chart. So you are working on your relationship. So let's say line number 1 that you're going to write down on what's going on with me today is where is the sun in your solar chart, all right? That's what your whole life rotates around or orbits around, all right? So we'll say it's around relationships. Now, we'll put that aside. We won't get too deep on that in this first one. Let's go to the natal chart. Now, in the natal chart, where is the sun, all right? And let's say you have an Aries rising, to keep it simple, and the sun is in Pisces. So, therefore, the sun is in the 12th house. So, you are working on relationships. That's the predominant theme of the month because you are a Virgo. But in your multi-lifetime story, you are clearing weeds. And what that means is, because the sun's in the 12th house, what that means is every time you work on relationships in your solar chart, you're pulling weeds in your multi-lifetime story. And that also means, because we have this connection of where the suns are, that you've got a lot of weeds with your relationship in life, in general. And you'll probably find that that case is true when you look at other planets in the natal 12th, that your soul has issues with relationships. Because every time you go to update your relationships as a Virgo, you find yourself pulling weeds, okay? So you're pulling weeds. So I look at the suns first, solar and then natal, where they are solar, where they are natally. Then usually I skip over to Saturn, because Saturn is a powerful force in the chart. There is always the Saturn lesson going on, always, 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 always. And Saturn is really dominant. So, given our example, I'm going to do some math here. Saturn is in Libra, so that means for an Aries rising, you are working on relationship issues. Now, I didn't plan that. You saw me come up with that on the fly. So that means for your multi-lifetime story with Saturn in Libra right now, you are working on relationship issues. So it is a month of relationships, pulling weeds, while all the while continually working on relationship issues with Saturn. So I'll look at Saturn to see what's going on. Usually Saturn is really, the sun is most prominent in your life. Saturn is almost always going to impress a girl in a bar. Okay? Or a guy, depending on which way you go. But it's going to always impress someone because it's really clear and obvious when they start to look at their life, oh goddess, we know Saturn will beat the heck out of you. Then usually, to see what's going on in a person's life, I will probably look at, Pluto, but Pluto is very deep and very subtle. So Pluto's in Capricorn, which means that in our Aries rising of our natal chart example, Pluto would be in the 9th house. So I would say, okay, you're working on relationship issues. I would say you're pulling weeds right now in your multi-lifetime story. Relationship, you're growing, your soul is growing. You used to think that you had to marry princes, or knights in shining armor, but Saturn the 7th in the next 2 years is saying you're going to have to upgrade that whole idea of marriage. And with Pluto and Capricorn, I would say, very subtly, you're going to find that you're most often wrong. Because Pluto's in your house. No, excuse me, Pluto's in Capricorn. Excuse me, Pluto's in the 10th house. So I'm going to say a lot of this plays out in your career. Pardon me, I didn't mean to confuse you. Plays out in your career because Pluto's in Capricorn with an Aries rising. And that a lot of these relationship issues are probably playing out in your career. That's how the astrology tends to work, where it's like, oh, we've got to focus on, you know, our relationships, pulling weeds, and Saturn in the 7th, upgrading relationships. Where's Pluto? Oh, it's in the house of career. There's a good bet that 50% or more of these relationship problems are not romantic, but they're career, because Pluto has a deep, fundamental effect on what's going on now. So those are the deep theories of what's going on now. Now, again, in the natal chart, I'll probably look at Jupiter next, because Jupiter is where God Universe is saying, you got to grow here. You got to grow over here, right? Now, in this example, Jupiter currently is in Pisces, so this is a coincidence that I brought all this up. But that would mean, as a Virgo, you need to grow in your relationships. Oh, isn't that funny? And that would mean that with a natal chart of having an Aries rising, with the sun in Pisces, that you need to grow in your faith. Oh, how interesting. You see how it starts to theme? I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just going with where the planets are today. But that's how it starts to theme. Oh, goddess, look at that. The universe is helping you in this area. Then to get more acute, as in what's going on this month. Okay, so those are the big themes. Then to get more acute in the transits, as in what's going on this week and what's going on this month, well, then I look at Mercury, Mars, and Venus, because they're very fast-moving planets, all right? And I'll just go with, well, we have the sun in Pisces, so you'll probably find that Mercury is a little ahead of the sun, so you're focusing on relationships, you're focusing on weeds, but Mercury's in your first house, so you're thinking about, if Mercury's in your first, because the sun's in your 12th in the natal, we're talking natal, that would mean, okay, you're pulling weeds, but Mercury's ahead, so you're thinking about how your ego plays into pulling those weeds. Venus, let's say, is ahead too. You're thinking about ego and you're creating new ego, because Venus. And let's say Mars is far ahead, like down in the 3rd house. So that would say, okay, you're pulling weeds, you're thinking about ego, you're creating new ego, Mars is in the 3rd, you're very hyperactive, it's processing all the time, Mars has given all this intellectual energy to it, so I know my client is hyperactive, they're ego conscious, they're creating new ego, and they're focused on relationships. All the while, those relationships are probably in the career. Okay? All right, that's just one example. We're going to do this many times, and I'll see you next week for the beginning of Astro 104. Until then, live, love, be.